anyone here have any idea what all of these images have in common? I think you're getting it already. Anyone? Any brave souls? Oh, you're good. You're good, you're good. Yes, those images, each one of them weighs the same amount as both my breasts. It's true, approximately. That's a lot of weight to be carrying around. And so now you're probably all looking at my breasts if you weren't before. And I will say to you, it's okay to look. Here's the front view. Here's the left side, my good side, or my Schokolade side, as we say in der Schweiz, and the right side. I'm here to talk to you today about breasts. Now, did you know that breasts are not just something for you to look at? They actually serve a purpose. And though scientists cannot seem to figure out and to agree why exactly that female Homo sapiens developed breasts, one thing is for certain: they feed babies. They do. How exciting is that? They feed babies. Mine actually fed a tiny person for 11 months, which is really cool. Now, some of you may be looking at my breasts slightly differently now. It might be comforting, but it might be a little uncomfortable because just a moment ago, they may have been objects of sexual desire for some of you. So complex and fraught and confusing, and I've only just begun. And while only women can breastfeed, men too have breasts. But we tend not to objectify them quite in the same way. Hello, Mr. Brezhnev. Regardless of your thoughts about them, it is true that regardless of the size, breasts represent many things to many people. From motherhood, sexuality, fertility, womanhood, femininity, and maturity, and more. I like to call my breasts blessing and curse. But most of the time, when I think about my breasts, I think that they're funny. They're funny when I go running, and there aren't enough bras in my drawer to keep them from bouncing up and down when I go running. And it's not just women with big breasts who have this problem. I'm sure you've seen it before. They're really funny when I'm lying on my back and they fall into my armpits. I find that very amusing. It's not so pretty. But the time I find them the most funny is when I'm doing yoga. And as you can see, I'm not a master practitioner of yoga. I do try. My form leaves something to be desired. But what happens is when I try this position, which is called the plow position, and you put your legs up over your head and your toes are supposed to touch behind, my breasts fall into my face. And they will at least cover my mouth, if not my mouth and my nose, and I could suffocate myself. I mean, I find this really funny. And so, of course, when I'm in the back row of a yoga class, every time we do this, I start laughing hysterically. I get lots of dirty looks. And of course, I'm not going to suffocate because I could just unfold myself, but still, I find this very, very amusing. Most yoga teachers are pretty okay with it, but I did get kicked out of a class once for laughing when I was in this position because yoga is serious, people. They're also really heavy. So heavy that I'm in physical therapy every week for the weight and my back pain. I have herniated discs in my neck. I have a constant headache. And I've got permanent divots in my shoulders. 7 pounds, 3.2 kilos, or 7 hammers worth of weight I'm carrying around every day. And that's a lot. Is there any brave soul here in the front row who would be willing to feel the weight of the breasts? Oh, you brave, brave man, brave man. His hand went up really quickly. Yeah, so this is a pair of prosthetic breasts that I made for an art exhibit in Toronto last year, made out of simply pantyhose, beans, and rice. And we were joking that we could have a meal later, just put it in some water and boil it up. And so how does that feel?
It's really heavy.
Yeah, it looks really nice. It's very sexy. And it is really heavy to be carrying around. So it's no wonder when people like to come up to me and say, "Whoa, your boobs are really big," I get a little grumpy. Thank you, genius. I hadn't noticed. I didn't always have this rack. I was an average teenager, average height, average weight, average bust. You can see how lovely I looked when I was 15 on the right there. But I had an extraordinary amount of confidence, more confidence than probably any other teenager you could imagine. I wore business suits to school every day, as you can see, or very put-together outfits, right up through college where people thought I was a professor and everyone else was running around in sweatpants and I was very dressed. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't kiss boys. I matched my shoes to my handbags, different hairstyle every day. Never late for curfew, designated driver, and I loved every minute of it. But something happened. And I lost that confidence. And for the past 30 years, I've been searching for it and wondering where this confidence went. And it wasn't until I was in grad school a few years ago where I started to read and think and talk and write about feminism and body image that it occurred to me. You see, when I was 22, I had a little growth spurt, and I grew an inch, and my breasts went from being a C cup to a triple D within what seemed like weeks. And suddenly, the male gaze was upon me, and the female gaze was upon me, and my now very large breasts defined who I was as a person. The confident teenager was gone forever. The world now looked at me as a sexual object, and in turn, I did too. The stereotypes piled on. If you have big breasts, you're more feminine than women without large breasts. If you have big breasts, you're more fertile. You can easily breastfeed. You're not very smart. You're easy. You like to show them off, obviously. And you really like sex. So in this situation, I had two choices. I could be in denial, which I did for a long time. I gained weight. I wore big shirts. I developed my signature self-deprecating sense of humor. Or acceptance, and I did that too. It's really amazing to have the power of seldom having to pay for drinks and getting jobs in television and film because of your rack and unbuttoning a few buttons to get out of a speeding ticket. There's power in that. It's a rush. But sure, saving a few bucks and getting a few jobs because of my breasts was great, but what had I paid in non-monetary terms by accepting myself as a sexual object? So what happens when we sexualize someone? Oftentimes we fetishize them, which means separate into parts. We become so focused on this one part that we forget about all the other parts of the body. Brain? What brain? And we're so focused on this part that we forget that there's a whole person involved. So what happens if the thing that I've been objectified for suddenly changes or is gone? What happens if I age? What happens if my breasts droop or sag someday? What happens if I get that reduction that I'm talking about, I'm thinking about? What happens if, heaven forbid, I get cancer and they have to be removed? Who am I then if I'm not the woman with the largest breasts in the room? Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. And the objectifying gaze has been around for a very long time, mostly perpetuated by the media, in everything from mainstream films and television, video games and music videos, porn, men's magazines, women's magazines, even art. This is one of my favorite pieces. I've had it for a long time. Take a second to read it. Even the most diligent consumers among us has little clue of how much we're being subtly manipulated every day. These images have become so embedded and nuanced that we barely even bat an eye at things that should be deemed offensive or inappropriate. What a mess. So, how do we fix this? Some people have suggested that we place warnings on the advertisements that could be deemed offensive, like we do with alcohol or tobacco in some places, which is a pretty good idea. There's something to that. And other people have suggested that maybe we ban any objectifying media that objectifies women. But I feel like that's a form of censorship, and there's got to be a better way. So maybe we train ourselves in critical viewing so that we can really understand what it is that we're looking at and pay attention to everything and ask questions. I have an answer. Just stop looking. Stop looking at my breasts. Stop looking at my legs. Just stop. Well, that's not a very feasible situation, is it? We can't stop looking. We're biological creatures. It's in our genes. Now, this is an explanation, not an excuse. I don't have all the answers. In fact, I have very few, and I'm thinking and writing and talking to people constantly about this. And I'm going to leave you with 3 more questions. 1, what is objectification? I think we've kind of covered that, but it's one of those concepts that I think most of us know what it means, but if you had to explain it to someone else, it's a little fraught, it's a little confusing sometimes. But if we're thinking about it, this is the first step. My definition is seeing or treating a person, usually a woman, like a thing, as if she had had no feelings, opinions, or rights of her own. Next, should I objectify this woman? Is she blonde? Is she redhead? Is she brunette? Does she have big boobs? Does she have small boobs? Does she have average size boobs? Did she look at you in a flirty way? Is she wearing high heels? Does she have red lipstick on? Is she short? Is she tall? Is she fat? Is she thin? If the answer to any of these questions is no, then no, you can't objectify her. If the answer to any of these questions is yes, you still can't objectify her. If she is, or if it is a robot, or a vase, or a rock, go ahead and objectify. These are objects. So what can I do to be part of the solution? First step is to become aware of your surroundings. We go through life with blinders on and we don't even notice these things in our everyday life. Start paying attention. Question and discuss these things amongst your group of peers. And for me, the most important thing is talk about this with your children and with kids around you and other people's children. It's so important. And these kids see these images all day long too, and it must be really confusing for them. It's really important to talk to them about this. Be an agent for change in your community and stop staring and start talking. So I'm going to give you one last look. There's no shame in looking at a body. But just know that because I have large breasts does not automatically mean that I am dumb or easy. And because a woman has small breasts does not mean that she can't breastfeed or she's less feminine than a woman with larger breasts. And if a woman is wearing a tight sweater, that does not mean that she's craving attention. And if she's wearing a short skirt, it doesn't mean that she wants to be catcalled. It is only by changing our behavior that we can make all of this a universally held truth. Thank you.